Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. To mention some of the essays that the Tapa Punj Prabhu wrote, The Stepping Stones to Real Cow Protection, Unraveling New Vrindavan's Plain Living, High Thinking Riddle, Cow Chauvinism, The Case for More Kale and Less Bull, Eggplant Dharma, How a Bunch of Kids Built a Palace of Gold, and Bad Karma is Not Sustainable, Farming as If Your Next Life Depends on It. In 1999, Tapa Punj founded the Small Farm Training Center, a nonprofit, publicly supported educational organization, the centerpiece of which was 2 agricultural growing sites, one in New Vrindavan, a half acre of what was called the Teaching Garden, and the 6.5 acres known as the Garden of Seven Gates. Both projects were lightning rods for youth recruitment and Indian congregational development. Tapa Punja's farming and gardening initiatives have drawn hundreds of student apprentices who learn to connect the dots between self-sufficiency and Krishna consciousness. He currently serves in the greater Wheeling, West Virginia area as a farmer trainer, mentoring AmeriCorps volunteers and administering 2 USDA grants on a 20-acre site called the Big Wheeling Agrarian Center. And in the chat box, I've provided Tapa Punj Prabhu's information on his small farm training center. That information, his phone numbers there, and Jivan Mukta Prabhu's information is also there. So Tapa Punj Prabhu, please share with us some of your realizations and what has come out of 30 years of being grounded and being dug into Krishna's soil. And where are we going from here? Where have you been? And where do you think we need to be going? Because I remember you were mentioning, because of the influence of the job, how it's going to impact on our ability to get food.
Right. Thank you very much. And I'd like to offer my respects to all the assembled devotees who are taking part in this, whether you're directly speaking or just listening. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, I guess I'd like to start out by explaining that the title of this particular podcast, Civil War, pretty charged series of words, and the second half of Srila Prabhupada's mission was the reason that we came up with that from a farmer's perspective. The reason we came up with that title was to highlight the fact that Prabhupada prophesied that eventually devotees should move towards rural areas and take up farming, take up a rural lifestyle, maybe not directly farming, but at least assembling together in a rural setting. So there's a certain kind of inevitability about all that. And while it's certainly meritorious to get involved with doing Harinam to save as many souls as we can, there's also a strong impetus to understand why Prabhupada wanted his disciples and grand disciples and followers in general to take up rural life. And recently, Govinda Dasi and Krishna Premi from Australia have been discussing this online. Very interesting discussion. One taking the side that no, we must prepare by moving in that direction towards the farms, and the other saying no, we must protest. And actually, in my discussions with senior Vaishnavas, both positions are tenable. In other words, it's glorious. My humble obeisances to the devotees who went to Ottawa in freezing cold weather in order to spread the holy name and to explain the connection, as Jivan Mukta just so expertly did, between freedom and Krishna consciousness. So what I would like to explore here is that when we say civil war, we're not talking about some kind of romanticized violent insurrection that the devotees are participating in, like some attack on the demons. We're not talking about that. That devotees may have to someday defend themselves with arms and with Kshatriya warrior spirit. That may come to pass. We'll see. But the civil war we're talking about is the basic dichotomy in the material world that sustainability itself is a misnomer. There is no such thing as sustainability in a temporary place. And even though this word within the Krishna consciousness Sangha is kind of misused a lot, as it is on the outside as well. The fact is, the material world is temporary. No matter what you do to try to make it sustainable, it's not, because it's a place meant for our rectification. It's a place meant for correcting our enjoying spirit, redirecting that enjoying spirit towards Krishna's pleasure. And even no matter what you do to try to make the earth whole or the oceans whole or correct what the damage that's been done, the fact is that as Kali Yuga progresses, it's going to get worse. So that kind of begs the question, well, why try? Why bother? Why even explore this topic? Just eat what's there, offer it to Krishna, and be happy. And that's not what Prabhupada wanted. In other words, you may be in a situation sometime where you have no choice. But what Srila Prabhupada wanted was the second half of his mission. And as one devotee being interviewed on Prabhupada Memories brought this up, it was Kaladri Prabhu, the former temple president, good friend of mine in New Vrindavan. Prabhupada told him directly, he said, the second half of my mission will not look anything like the first half. It will be completely different. So what does that mean? What is Prabhupada saying? And of course, we get some indication about what Prabhupada meant by that in his last days before he left us. And that is that he said, I have no lament. And then he corrected himself and he said, actually, I do have one lamentation. And that lamentation is that I have not established the second half of my mission, namely Daivi Varnashram. So I would like to go to Gita Nagari and I would like to sit down and I would like to show how to live on the land, how to live with the land. So my own adhikar, or my own set of activities for the last 30 years basically has been focused around how to create facility for that to happen. And the preaching opportunities that avail itself by not only presenting that in the devotee communities, but also outside the devotee communities are wonderful. Just such an amazing opportunity, because what we have to offer in terms of the biggest conversation on planet Earth, which is unfortunately not about Krishna Katha at this point, it will be, but the biggest dialogue going on throughout the world is sustainability, energy use, climate change, and all these things. And what is our Krishna conscious understanding of all those issues? So the experience that I've had in terms of that kind of outreach of creating agricultural settings that aren't just production fields, but are actually settlements, agricultural settlements, has been such a wonderful opportunity to share Krishna consciousness with others. And if I could tell one story, if it's okay, that kind of highlights that. Over the years, I've been attending sustainable agricultural conferences, mostly in the area of Pennsylvania. There's a very big one there called the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Ag. It draws 2,000 or 3,000 people every year. And because of my connections to West Virginia University in the Ag Science Department and the professors that I knew there, they would pay my way to go to that. They'd pay my conference fee to go to that conference. So for 6 or 7 years consecutively, I attended that conference. And what was disturbing to me as a devotee was that I started seeing that there was a a certain trend in the workshop presentations. Again, this is 2 days of solid workshops with keynote speakers and dinners and auctions. It's quite a gala event. And from 10:30 in the morning until 6 at night, there's consecutive workshops going on, some of them running concurrently, and they're pretty interesting. But what I noticed was that many of them, of the themes of those workshops, were leaning towards the organic slaughter industry, namely pasture-fed beef and free-range chickens, and the economic opportunities inherent with pork production done organically, and the market that's opening up in New York City for that, and all these kind of topics. And I went to one workshop entitled "How I Grow 80% of My Food on 5 acres of land." So I attended, and the reason he's able to do that particular farmer, is that, yes, he does have a garden. Yes, he does have some fruit trees, but most of what he does is slaughter geese and ducks and collect their eggs. And that's actually how he's able to do it on 5 acres of land. And at the end of his talk, he read a poem, which was kind of a poetic expression or rationalization why slaughter is okay. And at the end of his reading, everybody in the room stood up and gave him a standing ovation. They were all clapping their hands. And I sat there mortified. And I thought, where is Krishna consciousness here? Where's the other side of this picture? So I approached the steering committee of that conference. Some of them, over the years, I'd gotten to know some of them. And I said, there's a whole nother approach to agriculture that is based on a very different worldview, in which the animals themselves are considered to be co-authors in agriculture, and therefore they're protected. In fact, all life is to the best of our ability, protected. And you've got a conference here with 2,000 or 3,000 people, many of them students from Penn State University, entry level, just learning about these subject matters. And many of those are vegan or they're vegetarian. There's this whole growing demographic of young people interested in nonviolent ways to get food. And there's absolutely this huge conference. There's nothing for them. There's many displays and kiosks, little fat farmer guys passing out, beef jerky out in the open. But there's nothing at all for that the growing demographic. 1 out of every 200 American teenagers is turning towards or is a vegetarian. So regarding that other side of the picture, I would like to do a workshop on that next year. So they said, that's fine, just write us an abstract, write us a summary of what you want to say. So I wrote an essay entitled, "Bad Karma is Not Sustainable. Farming as if your next life depends on it." And I submitted that. And the theme of that essay was basically this, that if a farming system is sustainable, it obviously has to protect the land from degradation, chemicals and whatnot. It obviously has to protect the watershed from also being polluted. But if it's not protecting the farmer, he or she, how can that, from karmic vulnerability, how can it be sustainable? And of course, the people I was messaging with that were about my age. I'm 73 now. So, they kind of grew up in the hippie era, and they kind of know, karma. Oh yeah, karma. They have no idea what it is. They don't know how it works, the intricacies of it, and the responsibilities inherent with avoiding bad karma. So they were kind of open to the message, but I pointed out to them that even the patriarchs of your modern Western farming methods, Sir Albert Howard, Rudolf Steiner, the biodynamic people, what to speak of Emerson and Thoreau, all of these Western people drew inspiration from India and from the Vedic teachings. So how is it possible that you have this whole array of workshops going on in which none of that is taught? There's no opportunity to even find out the other side of this picture of how do we supply food, how do we use the land nonviolently. And they got back to me on a phone call and they said, great idea. You can't do it though, it's too controversial. And that's when I really got mad. And I said to them, you're completely irresponsible. Are you telling me that these students can come and hear about slaughtering animals for profit and that there's no consequence to that if they have an alternative, especially? And finally, I don't know, somehow over the phone, we kind of put it together and they said, all right, we're going to let you do it. They gave me a time slot and it was an hour-and-a-half presentation. I walked into the room where the workshop was to be conducted. And normally this conference is so big, there are concurrent workshops going on at the same time. And if you got 30 people at your workshop, that's pretty good because there's a lot of other good workshops. I had 100 people walk in and many of them I knew from years of attending that conference, and they were the pasture-fed beef, free-range chicken guys, right? And I was kind of standing at the podium and I was sweating bullets. I was going, this may not have been a really good idea. In fact, I had borrowed from the temple in ISKCON temple in Detroit, the Murti of Axeman, you know, the illustration made into a Murti of chopping at the cow's neck and the faces are transposed. And the essay I handed out to everybody. But by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, I got up to the microphone and I remembered the pastime of Prakashananda Saraswati being converted by the fact that Caitanya Mahaprabhu was so humble in his presentation that he won their hearts to the point where he was able to say, by the way, the teachings of Shankaracharya are flawed. Would you like me, with your permission only, could I explain why this philosophy is flawed? By his beauty and his humility, they said yes. So following that lead, I got up to the microphone and I said, you know, it says in the write-up, excuse me, about each presenter here that I'm a devotee of Krishna. I live on a Hare Krishna farm. We protect cows. We are strict vegetarians. So you're probably thinking that I came here to lecture you, to moralize to you, to judge you, but that's not why I'm here. I'm only here to share with you a secret of sustainability from the oldest culture on planet Earth, the oldest farming system on planet Earth. And is that not only is it a better farming system, but it's understanding how this works is critical to your personal destiny. And that line, this information is critical to your personal destiny captured now. So I said, if before I get into the nuts and bolts of how this farming works, organically, cow protection, the symbiotic relationship between them, could I kind of run you through a quick 10-minute reality check on how the world works? And they granted me permission. In other words, I was saying to them, I don't want to preach to you, but if you give me 10 minutes, I will. Anyway, so I took the microphone and I started out the talk by saying, let me ask a question of everybody. There's 100 people in the room. How many people in this room believe that animals have a soul? 10, 15 people. Why? Why do you think that? Then I turned it around. I said, how many think they don't have a soul? Same number of people. Why? Why do you think that? But then I would cap off the discussion by just saying, well, that's interesting. But according to the ancient literatures of India, the scriptures called the Vedas, wherever we see birth, death, growth, maturity, dwindling, and death, those 6 changes, the soul is present. And then I picked out one person in the audience who was frail. It was a young college student who was kind of, thin-framed. His name was Robert. And I said, Robert, in front of everybody, I said, what would happen right now if I came up to you, left this podium, and just grabbed you and started beating you mercilessly without cause? I just threw you on the ground and started beating you, what would happen? And of course, the students all piped up and said, "Oh my God, we would call the campus police." First thing, they'd be informed. They would call the city police. They would handcuff you. They would take you away. You'd have a preliminary hearing. You would have to plead guilty or not guilty. And of course, if you plead not guilty with 100 people who saw you do this violence without reason, that would be a little silly. And I said, "Yeah, you're exactly right. That's exactly what would happen." And then beyond that, I'd have to live with the reputation that I'd committed assault and battery on an innocent person. So if we agree that that law is a good law, that it's a deterrent to unwanted, uncalled for violence of one entity to another, and this was the punchline. Who gave you the idea? Where did you get the idea that this universal law about violence is only operative in human to human relations? What if it's operative in human to animals, or human to plants, or human to the planet itself? Where did you get this idea that this is only a functional law that is applicable only in human to human relations? Who told you that? So it was like dead silent. Maybe somebody piped up, well, Jesus ate fish, or some ridiculous argument. So then I went into the Bhagavatam verse explaining that in the unnecessary killing of an animal, there are 6 co-conspirators, and I explained them, co-conspirator by co-conspirator. And these are the people in that room, except for the students probably. And at the end of that, somebody raised their hand and said, "Could you repeat that one more time?" They're furiously taking notes, Anyway, my point here is that I went from being completely fearful of what I was about to present to feeling totally empowered, as if Srila Prabhupada was speaking through me, because I was preaching truth to power. And it was such a liberating feeling. I felt like, yes, this is what it means that we are the Brahmins, that we are supposed to be leading human society. Or as one devotee once said, we should be the guardians of the mode of goodness. However, you can't be the guardians of the mode of goodness when commercial trucks are rolling into your temples, unloading poison boga grown in California under extremely violent conditions, the violence to the earth, violence to the people picking it and growing it, violence to the bugs that hit the windshield as it rolls across country. So how is it that this second half mission will free itself from those shackles? How is that going to happen? The fact is, our farms are not traditional farms. They're more like Hindu retreat centers with a cow zoo and a big parking lot and fields that are unused. That's what people see. And that's especially what people see when they are interested in sustainability, and they want to learn how to grow things, and they come to a Krishna conscious community and they go, wait a minute, very little of what we're eating here is grown by the hands of the devotees who live here. Why is that? They ask, these are smart people, and they ask that question. Whether it's New Vrindavan or Gita Nagari or this place or that place, they're not stupid. They see that happening. So what's our answer? How do we explain that? Well, we're more interested in raising awareness about karma and reincarnation. That's all good and that's all true. It's all noble that we're able to present those subjects in a convincing way. But the fact is, if you don't have a working model where you're living what you're preaching, then it's hypocritical. And that's what people pick up on. So the fact is, this material world is not sustainable, but the reason we want to even teach that is because it's Krishna's property. And we are, as Krishna's sons and daughters, we are duty bound to protect his creation to be used in his service. So our marching orders come from Upanishad. Our marching orders come from Bhagavad Gita, and certainly they come from Srila Prabhupada. He wanted the second half of his mission, and he said, it will not look anything like the first half. It'll be completely different. So if the devotees listening to this think that that things are just going to go on the way they are, and this COVID thing will kind of go away, and it might not happen like that. It might, the new normal may be that there will be supply chain disruptions, that the places where you think you can shop and dependably get your food supply are not going to be there. Then what? For example, the average calorie count that's considered to be healthy is 2,000 calories per day per person. And what I've seen, and this is my experience in various Krishna conscious rural communities, is that, yeah, there's a garden, and yeah, there's a little bit of milk production, but really it only amounts to maybe 10 or 15% of what devotees actually eat. Because what devotees actually eat is grains, starches, carbohydrates, and then everything else is kind of a side dish. So if our farming operations are not capable of producing those things because we think, oh, there are other priorities that make money, and of course we need money. Why do we need money? We need money because we have to buy our boga from the outside. This is a little bit silly. It's a little bit ridiculous. And therefore, I wrote this one article called Cow Chauvinism, the case for more kale and less bull, because what I saw over the years of farming was that the emphasis was all being put on sort of literally milking the sentiments of our wonderful Indian guests who come about giving donations for the cows. Yet, when they left the barn and went over to stand in line to get prasadam, everything that was being served to them is coming from California, Mexico, Colombia, some other place. So when you isolate food production from cow protection and you get into a crisis, now you're in trouble. And that's exactly what's happening. It's also reflected in the health of the devotees. Devotees are dying from the same diseases that the karmis are, especially cancer, heart disease, these things. One time I gave a talk on invitation at West Virginia University to the ag science students, the graduating class, about 25 people in an auditorium. So they brought me in as the organic guy, right? During that semester, they got to mix it up a little bit. So they brought in the organic guy. So I stood in front of these 25 people and I said, you've invited me to talk about organic farming. I'm not going to say anything about farming organically until you answer a question for me. How many in this room, please raise your hand, have one, if not two relatives who have died of cancer? And not surprisingly, everybody in the whole room raised their hand, myself included. Both my parents died of cancer. Now stand up and look around to see what we're looking at here. Okay, I got a second question for you. How many of the ladies in here, it's about half girls, how many of the ladies in here plan to have children someday? And everybody wanted to have a family. So I said, well, what happens in your body when you eat foods that are grown in soils that are saturated with chemical fertilizer, synthetic petroleum-based chemical fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, repeatedly, year after year after year in the same soil? That plant, that eggplant, cauliflower, lettuce, whatever it is, takes that up into its tissue. When you eat it, where does that go in your body? What does your body do to process that? And of course, nobody had an answer. So I said, well, technically your liver and your kidney are supposed to filter that out. But because most of us have compromised systems, our kidneys and livers don't work functionally very well. It's stored in your body. Where does it go in your body? Those chemicals. And of course, nobody knew that. So I said, well, by God's grace, it goes into the least metabolically active part of your body, the fat tissue. It's stored there. In fact, your body then builds cells around it to encapsulate those poisons, those chemical toxins, so they don't leach into your bloodstream. So they're like little time bombs in your body. Now, you said you want to have a child. How is that child eating when it's floating in the amniotic fluid in your womb? What's the process by which that child, that baby, is eating? And of course, nobody knew exactly. So I said, well, through the belly button, through the umbilical cord. What's at the other end of the umbilical cord? The fat tissue of the mother. That's why women have an extra layer of fat. So even if you don't get pregnant for 10 years, decide not to have a family, you want to go into a career or try to pay your college loan off, your future child's predisposition to neurological disease like autism, Alzheimer's, all these, even cancer, all these things, is already inherently there in the tissue of your body because you're eating foods that are grown with a profit motive behind it that is bad for you. Bad. In other words, the genetic predisposition is going to travel through that family if that kid eats the same way. Now, do you want to talk about organic? So we not only do we have to be bold in our outreach on the outside, why we farm, why we grow our own food, why we grow what we eat and eat what we grow, why we live where we work and work where we live. But we have to get this message out to the devotees themselves, because the devotees that are listening to this and others who aren't are going to be moving towards a rural setting. And most of them have absolutely soil, how to read soil, why Prabhupada said that farming is the most noble occupation. Go ahead, Gaura, you had a question?
No, there was a little break in what you said. Did you notice that, Pradyumna?
Yeah, he was saying that people don't know how to read soil, I guess.
Go ahead, please continue, Prabhu.
Okay, so part of the problem in our devotee sangha is that there's this grand misuse of the yukta vairagya principle. Of course, as Rupa Goswami has explained, yukta vairagya basically means that anything renounced that could be used in Krishna's service is a feature of Maya, illusion, that potentially everything has its use in Krishna's service. That's the spirit of yukta vairagya. We understand that, we agree with that. However, when you apply that to what you're putting into your body, or more importantly, what you're serving the deities, the quality of what you're giving the deities, it's absolutely shameful. We think, most temples I've seen, they think the deities are like a vending machine. You just take this chemically grown boga, and even though you're surrounded by land, and everybody's sitting around gossiping and not actually working the land, you take this boga that you bought from, God only knows where it came from, you put it in the vending machine, you pull the lever, and it comes out prasadam. Amazing. Well, if you have no other choice, it is amazing. It is a miracle how Krishna purifies everything. Philosophically, we're not questioning that. But the fact is, when you do have a choice, when you live in a community that has ample opportunity for taking unused land and developing it, the culture that engenders that is the second half of Srila Prabhupada's movement. So to think that it's equal to just take any foodstuff and offer it to the deities is an offense, when in fact the order of your founder Acharya is to develop a purified foodstuff. We think the offering means, bring it in, the cook grabs it out of a cardboard box, the pujari comes in and makes the plates, And the offering is when he's ringing the bell and making the actual offering. That's the offering. No. Yes, it is in one sense, but the real offering begins with you putting the seed in the soil, the consciousness that went into that, the care of that land. And in these rural communities, the way you become Krishna conscious is not just attending Mangal Arti and seeing the deities and commenting on how wonderful they look, and seeing Krishna in that form, but we have to learn to see Krishna in his energy and how to use that energy in Krishna's service by working in a spirit of cooperation on the land. That is the heartbeat of the second half of Srila Prabhupada's movement. And as long as you're misusing that Yukta Vairagya principle, you'll never get there. As long as you're seeing the Indian congregation as a unlimited source of funds to go buy your boga, you'll never get there. Not going to happen. So the whole idea of varnashram development, Daivi varnashram, is based upon the petri dish for it is growing food. When Prabhupada was asked about farm community development, I don't know if you know this, but Hari Krishna Dasi and Sureshwara did a wonderful job putting out a book entitled Srila Prabhupada Speaks on Farm Community Development and Varnashram. I think there was only 1,000 copies printed. And in that book, there's a room conversation where Srila Prabhupada says, in establishing a Krishna conscious rural community, the first problem to solve is the food problem. On our Gita Nagari farm, this is the heydays of Gita Nagari in the early 80s, we have solved this problem. So it's the fact is that the effort to grow food organically, the integrity it takes to do that, the many hands making light work to make that happen, the culture that surrounds it, and the ancillary businesses that come from that, the ancillary services that are concomitant with growing food, that is the beginning of our Varnashram culture. Doesn't mean, and the statement that Srila Prabhupada made about farming being the most noble of occupation means that any devotee who takes that up for the pleasure of Krishna is blessed. And the reason they're blessed is because they are providing the deities, the families, the ashram residents, and the guests, and charitably providing a nutritious foodstuff, the basis of a nutritious foodstuff that's then transformed into prasadam that makes society peaceful, because none of the other ashrams have to worry about that. In other words, farming is the one thing that is able to service the most fundamental of human needs. That is eating every day, but from a purified source. So the second half of Prabhupada's movement isn't just for a few, those crazy guys that go out there and work outside in the cold, and it's actually for everybody. It means that everybody should participate on whatever level they can. One time, Shiva Ram Swami, the last time actually he was visiting New Vrindavan, we were talking and I said, so how do you do that on campus at New Vrajadam? Is that what it's called? New Vrajadam, I believe. Yeah, in Hungary. And I asked him, I said, so how does that work? And he said, well, we have a rule that everybody who lives on campus, I think it was about 150 devotees at that time, is expected to do 3 hours a week of something related to agriculture. It could be just working in the deity flower garden, or it could be much more physically demanding, like working with the oxen or scooping manure or whatever, planting vegetables. But everybody in that community is expected to perform 3 hours. So having been a temple president and temple commander and knowing some of the intricacies of that, that service, I said, well, what about the pujaris? Because what I've seen happen in ISKCON is that the pujaris kind of think of themselves as this like special class of people. And the way I grew up in Krishna consciousness was that after Mangal Arti, and after we dressed the deities, I know because I used to dress the deities along with Barshan Swami, we'd put our work clothes on and get out there in the fields and do stuff. So yes, we were pujaris. Yes, it was so wonderful and purifying, but it didn't mean that's all we did. We didn't fixate on the idea that this is the only thing I'll do and that's it. And I'm unaccountable after that. So that spirit of getting out into the, oh, I'm sorry. His answer was, when I said, what about the pujaris? He said, if they can show me that they don't eat, I don't expect them to go out and do any farming. But if they eat, they have to do something. So it's that mood of cooperation, not some corporate job description, but the mood of cooperation is what makes a community a community. And that, of course, is what Srila Prabhupada asked us for, is to show our love by cooperating like that. As the second half becomes more imperative, those skill sets of how to grow it, how to distribute it, how to teach how to get young people involved so they're enthusiastic to serve the needs of the deities, the families of the community, the ashram, like that, is such a noble occupation. And therefore, when I started the effort to do the Small Farm Training Center, at one point I moved to Mississippi to farm there for 5 years. And in the first 3 years I was there, we had 130 student apprentices. We made 7 devotees from that effort. And it's because I basically explained to them, we do want to teach you how to grow food organically. We do want to teach you how to cook it. We do want to teach you even how to market it. But more important than the cooking, the growing, the cooking, and the marketing of it is that you're learning how to do these things for the right spiritual reasons. So we want you to have a really well-rounded experience here. It's not just you're some grunt worker who's here for a month or two, but we want you to leave here with a whole different perspective of life. And that was powerful. I mean, when people would come, and I had 130 students like that over a 3-year period, first 3 years. I would ask them, why'd you pick this particular farm? What was it about it that you had so many other choices? And they would say, I can see you're on a mission, that you have a mission here. And then I would take them out to farmer markets, and we would do a lot of charitable distribution to Section 8 housing projects and to soup kitchens and things like that. And very, very, very powerful preaching. So in my humble opinion, there's no type of Western preaching that is more potentially powerful than involving Western people in everything related to farming. And that's how Varnashram is going to come about. It's not going to be that it's voted on in Mayapur. It's not going to be that it just magically appears out of nowhere. It's going to be driven by necessity, especially if there are supply chain disruptions. It will be driven by necessity, and it will be driven by blue collar local people whose connection to Krishna consciousness is through the land. Okay, I rest my case. Are we running out of time here, Pradyumna?
Doing good for time. Yeah, we could. Thank you so much. That was beautiful, Prabhu. I really appreciate what you said. Amazing.
I have a question, Prabhu.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I agree with what you say. There's no, I agree with everything you said, and there's devotees that I've heard similar, kind of, talks about Varnashram in that way as well. But how do you inspire? Like, it's hard work, and I think unless you're born in a family, a farmer family, and you're kind of accustomed to farming, and it takes a special type of person to just say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this my career. This is what I'm going to grow food. I'm going to forego, all the other opportunities for economic development. How do you inspire people to actually go out and do it unless it's in their nature? And because I don't think anyone can disagree with you, but it's a question of economics as far as how much it costs to actually do that. You know, like we were talking the other day, you know, to buy a farm in some locales, like in ours here, you're talking $1 million or $2 million for a
Right.
100-acre farm. Even if you get something with 5 acres, you're looking at least $500,000, if not more. So,
Wow.
pardon? Well, where we are anyway. Okay, so we would have to just kind of move somewhere where you can get land really cheap or something.
Right, like Antarctica, yeah.
It's not feasible. Like even if they could grow their food, they wouldn't be able to own their land. They won't be able to even pay their rent. Like they somehow have to, these realities are still there. You still have to pay a rent. You still have to pay a mortgage. You still have to, you know, you're going to have a car, you're going to have loans to pay. So how do you do that?
Okay, good question. And there is an answer. The answer is that farming isolated from preaching is just hard work. And it'll most people, as you properly have observed, can't do it. It's repetitive, it's routine, it requires a tremendous amount of physical stamina, and it requires a tremendous amount of mental discipline as well. Why? Because farming is the epitome of be here now. You have to go out there every day and look at the situation and adjust to changing your priorities because the weather has changed, the soil conditions have changed, bugs are attacking. There's so many things. However, when you bring other people on board who are interested in that, I mean, quite honestly, in all the years that I've been training people to do backyard gardening and small scale organic gardening on 5 acres or less, I don't think there's 10 of them that I saw that actually have farming DNA. They really get it. They go out there. When they go out there, they can read the landscape. They can see exactly what's happening, adjust, and make it happen. However, most of the people can be engaged in other ways. And that's why farming is the economic engine to make the other features of a community happen. For shop distribution, catering, all that other stuff. So someone who's a good manager, a good farm manager, reads the psychological and the physiological capabilities of people and doesn't work them to death. My God. I mean, I used to make that point to the woofers who would come. Woofers means worldwide opportunities on organic farms. That was where I was drawing my labor pool from. When they would first come, I'd spend 2 days with them, just assuring them that they weren't there just to be grunt workers, that we wanted them to have a really well-rounded experience. And oh, by the way, every day at 7:30 in the temple, there's a wonderful class from the ancient Vedic scriptures. There's musical accompaniment, there's chanting of Krishna's names. That's how we made devotees, like that. So
Here's an example.
as far as the economics of it, yeah, you're right. It's a tragedy that what's happening on the ISKCON Incorporated side of things is a hijacking of the land. Basically, a new couple who have a romanticized idea about farming, who comes to New Vrindavan, has absolutely no chance of buying land, because for one, we already bought the land. Most of us in our youth, in our 20s and 30s, collected the money to buy that land. And now what's happening is it's like the temple has become a land speculation real estate company. They're reselling the land that we already paid for, that we gave our youth to purchasing, that we gave our youth to, we gave our reputations to, our families, everything, and they're reselling it to wealthy Indian families. So if you come there as a young Grihasta couple with this romanticized idea, oh, New Vrindavan, cows, land, and you find out that you're sweeping the floors in the restaurant for $11 an hour, good luck buying land, because they're charging $35,000, $35,000 for an acre of land. So that's criminal. That should not be happening.
TAPAH Punja Prabhu, we have questions from Dineshwar Prabhu and also Mahaburi Prabhu. So we can come back to Jivan Mukta later if he's not satisfied fully. So I don't know who had their hand up first, Dineshwar or Mahabodhi Prabhu.
I don't know either.
Let Mahaprabhu go. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Mahabodhi Prabhu.
Hariba, I'd like to just address, offer my respectful obeisances and thank both speakers for very nice presentations. I wanted to step in on some of the stuff TAPAH Punja said and ask her the question what Jiva Mukta said. I have no farming DNA in my background or in my nature. I'm Chakri have been managing for upward 50 years already, 60 years. But I made the decision to sell my house in Florida and reconstruct back here in the hills of West Virginia, close to New Vrindavan. We started with a little gardening farm, put in a grant for a larger greenhouse, put in another grant with TAPAH Punja for some local farming, hired some of the people that work in the area to be able to, build some houses, help with some of the land that's coming up. So I think, one of the things we also have 16 acres in the New Vrindavan area, which will eventually be developed in that way. I think if anyone makes the choice that I think it was alluded to that pretty soon, as things get worse, devotees especially are going to end up having to move out of the cities because the cities are going to be targets for so many different things and move out into the areas. And if they do move out to the areas, they need to be as where they can be other people they can work with and being able to afford to purchase something and be able to grow locally. In other words, if you have a small house or even somewhere, use what place you have for whatever you can grow, for small vegetable gardens, whatever like that, and add it to. I work full time, but at the same time, we're going to start doing these things. So it's a question of, you don't have to be a farmer. We're also engaging TAPAH Punja and all the things I don't know, and some of the people here in local West Virginians who have experience in these things, and either hiring and helping us to do some of that stuff. And I think that's how things will go too, as TAPAH Punja said. This Varnashram system is not just going to be where the devotees are going to just operate this. It'll be done with the blue-collared workers, the people of the local community, the people that Prabhupada said will be coming to the farm communities by the thousands and the millions at some point. Now, if 4 people came, they couldn't accommodate them. But at some point in time, people are going to come for food and shelter and help, and they'll have to be engaged. And Prabhupada would say, engage them on the farms. And we don't have that much land now, but land will come as the necessity will be there. Land will be given. People won't know what to do with it. They'll be able to do it if they can get some part of the produce on. There's so many different things that will come up, and I think that's also part of what I think TAPAH Punja was alluding to, that the second half of Prabhupada's movement, which is also implementing this Varnashram, will be adding much more people from different philosophical and religious traditions that will have to come and work together because they'll become disillusioned, or they'll become economically disadvantaged from the culture that's happening around them and the things that will befall it. So I think that's one point. And I would like to read one thing by, it's a little small note from Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Goswami about farming, that it was Prabhupada's sannyas guru. And he said this in 1960. He said, those who consider farming to be somehow inappropriate for Vaishnavas and forcibly stop them from doing it are hypocrites and rogues. Such people do not even know what it means to be a Vaishnav or what Vaishnav Dharma is. Thus, they cannot become pure teachers of Vaishnav Dharma and are not to be accepted within such ranks.
Wow.
Hare Krishna. Dandavats.
Thank you. Can I add one thing to that quickly?
Go ahead.
There was a room conversation found in the Srila Prabhupada Speaks on Varnashram and Farm Community Development. And one devotee was saying to Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, when we preach to people that they have to give up sinful activity, gambling, meat eating, illicit sex, they don't like it. And they get kind of angry with us. So Prabhupada kind of laughed and he said, well, that's the nature of the beast. I mean, what did you expect? However, you need to engage them, and you need to, he said, he used the term 2 times. He said, practically attract, practically attract. In other words, you have to look at in what way can I engage this person in helping in the farming or in the mechanical work or any of the varnas that make things work. So that's how varnashram is going to grow. The idea that everybody's going to go to the ashram, shave up, come out a Brahmin, or it's not going to work like that. Does not happen.
Nope. Nope.
Are you ready to make your point, Dineshwar Prabhu?
Yes, yes. First of all, TAPAH PUNJA Prabhu, thank you very, very much. Such an inspiring presentation you made. I really, really appreciate it. I wish every devotee would be required to hear this, but at least I'll share it with as many as I can, and hopefully they will. There is several points that I want to make. First of all, you're talking about our early days when we joined Prabhupada. We joined it really in a revolutionary spirit. We were at that time in the 70s, and when I speak, I often speak about the times of the 60s and 70s, what they were like, because people who weren't there then, they don't understand. It's those times were extremely different from present, in that the youth of that time were having an awakening and being able to see that the hypocrisy of what was going on in the dominant culture. And they were looking for some alternative. And Prabhupada is the one who gave us that genuine alternative. And we joined him as revolutionaries, expecting that not only were we going to make the world Christian conscious, but we were going to give the world an entirely spiritual way to live. And that was, at least for myself, I'll say that I was convinced that we were going to be successful in that. I still believe we will, although we're a little bit separated by time at this point still. You mentioned other as well about I'm sorry. In terms of the economy and so on, I want to make the case that this money economy is not going to go on. If you follow the financial news, there's many people speaking about a huge economic crash even this year. We'll see when it comes. They're always speaking about crashes, but whenever they appear is another thing. But the demons, again, they got their great reset. They want to change the way the world works, and they use this problem reaction solution. So they're going to create a problem, and they'll come up with their solution of a cryptocurrency that's controlled by central banks, and they'll be able to control everything that everybody buys and sells. So the question is, how is the world going to work at that time? We don't know at this point, because they plan on changing rules about everything. But what we do know is that Krishna's got a plan. Lord Caitanya has told us that this world's going to be, the golden era of Lord Caitanya is coming. We can expect that. So how are we going to get that there from here? We don't know. This is a adventure movie, kind of like Indiana Jones, who, you look at it and you go, okay, how's he going to get out of this one? We're in that kind of a situation. And how are we going to get there from here? That's going to be really far out to sea. But if we work at it, you'll get there. And we have to work. It's not going to happen just by itself. Again, thank you for your presentation. I hope everybody can
can see this. And then one other point that I want to address for Jivamukta Prabhu, that you had mentioned about the society being destroyed in various different ways. And there's a wonderful video that I recommend to everybody to watch. It is Yuri Bezmenov. He's a former KGB agent from the KGB back in the 80s.
How do you spell his name, please?
Bezmenov, Bezmenov, Yuri, Yuri.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah.
And he gives this lecture about the what is it? The not the infiltration, the basically how to destroy society. He lays it all out. And when you watch that video, you see exactly, especially anybody who's over 50 years, you can see how every one of the points that he's made has happened in the West. So, in other words, America's been infiltrated and deliberately destroyed from within. So they're doing this to what do they call it? Fifth generation warfare or something like that. Anyway, it's it's not a normal fight. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is everything's going to change. And we've got, as devotees, we've got a solution. A lot of people, most people, because of their worldview, limitations of their worldview, they can't even understand the problem, what to speak of the solution. But the Vedic worldview gives us the opportunity to understand both the problem and the solution. The solution is Krishna consciousness, and the solution is Varnashram Dharma. Economic basis of Varnashram Dharma is agriculture, not money. Money destroys Varnashram culture, and maybe we can have that discussion another time. Anyway, I'll stop with that. And again, thank you very much.
Jivamukta has a comment, a question, and then we can.
Before we go there, excuse me, just for reference to Daneshwar Prabhu, the title of Yuri's talk is "The Four Stages of Ideological Subversion," 1984.
Can I add one thing
That's
to that?
another one. Or
Okay. All right.
Can I add one thing to that? Since you're talking
please.
about the KGB.
Then we'll go to Jivan Mukta after that.
Okay. I found this, I can't remember somewhere, but it says the KGB psychological experiments of the 60s and 70s. And this, by the way, explains why many of our God brothers in ISKCON Incorporated have the opinions that they do. It says the KGB learned that if you bombard human subjects with fear messages nonstop in 2 months or less, most of the subjects are completely brainwashed to believe the false message to the point that no amount of clear information they are shown to the contrary can change their mind.
And this is where the the schools as slaughterhouses come in, because the schools are indoctrination centers. That's all they are. And I can give a personal example. I have 7 children. And the first half got a really good dose of homeschooling, like almost exclusively homeschooled. The younger ones, once we moved into Toronto and they decided, they wanted to go to public school and, high school and, university, and it's like black and white as far as how they perceive even currently what's going on in society. Literally split black and white. And, we could say that it's just anecdotal that homeschooling or the educational system had the influence, but I'm convinced by, whenever I talk to them, that they've just been completely, molded by their professors and by their teachers, and they've learned to accept a certain worldview that the ones that were homeschooled don't have, because the ones that were homeschooled associated with us all the time. And there was Bhagavatam, and there was, videos of Lord Ram and the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and it was different. And it's amazing how their perspective of the current crisis in the world is literally, split right down the middle, right, according to where they got educated. And I also want to mention one other thing regarding TAPAH Punja Prabhu's wonderful talk. I think one way also that this could work is it's important for us, first of all, to talk about it, because first we have to discuss, and then it can somehow manifest. It may manifest in ways that we don't even know. One of the ways is through cooperation. It's going to have to be through cooperation. It's going to have to be through cooperation between those devotees who are able to somehow access assets like land and say, you know what? Because TAPAH Punja Prabhu, essentially, this is what you're saying, that the devotees collectively assembled land in New Vrindavan, which was supposed to go towards this type of project. Since then, the allurement of cash has taken over. The commitment towards this has totally disappeared, it seems. But if we can have land available, then it makes it all that more possible, to develop something like this, because many of the devotees that would be prepared, because I know, I had a farm close by here and I had some young people come. They were so anxious to come and help out, but we weren't making even that much money for me to be able to pay them. So I had to pay them based on other businesses that I had. It was a net loss. They were very, very anxious to stay there, but there's just only so long you can go to, paying someone when there's no production, when there's nothing in, nothing there in return. So because I had a mortgage on the property and so on. But if we are able to get assets where we're not, weighed down, where we're not obliged financially in that way, then it's possible. It'll be possible, because it's not just the will to do it, because there are people that would say, yes, I would rather be out in the field and working hard. I enjoy that work, but I have to do all this other stuff. And even if we preach, the point is that all these devotees, like, unless they're all brahmacharis or single, and they can just, live in one big, a building that we can put up for 30 brahmacharis or something. But unless they're all brahmacharis, which I would expect most would be householders, they need to be maintained. They need shelter. They're going to have to, there's clothing that's required and medicine and all this stuff. So that's the challenge, is somehow getting hold of assets that aren't weighing us down financially, that aren't a burden.
Nice point.
Divanmukta Prabhu, I know you were you had the project there to grow hemp, which is, I think, a popular project. What did you run into? What's
Well, it's like, especially for us, like my wife wanted to grow hemp, and so we planted 40 acres of hemp. And it's like, it's funny in retrospect. The plants were growing. It was great. Gord, they looked something like what's in your background.
that's more kale and less bull.
That's more kale. Ours were beautiful, big, fat, hemp plants. Some of them,
Wow.
some of them were like small. But what happened was, during the summer, as they were growing, late summer or middle of the summer, I noticed like huge flocks of birds just swarming, and it was beautiful to see them. It was just like artistic. It was just gorgeous. But then when we went to harvest, I was looking at these big, beautiful, fat, like flowers, and it's like, where's all the seeds? And I couldn't figure it out. There was actually, I was so naive that there was a part of me that thought, I think some people came in here at night and stole the seeds. But that just shows you how like inexperienced I was. I actually thought that people would drive in, risk being caught to take hemp seeds, because actually hemp is illegal in Canada, right? You can't grow it. You got to get special permit. Anyway, afterwards, I realized I know what happened. Those birds ate all the seeds. Those flocks of beautiful diving birds totally consumed all of the production. And out of 40 acres, you know how much seed we got? Like two like 25 kilo bags of seeds. It was outrageous. But the other thing too was to harvest the hemp. The regular combines, you can't use them because the hemp stock is so strong
Excuse me.
that the hemp stock actually could break the blades of the combine. And
Wow.
we had trouble with combine breaking down because it just wasn't powerful enough to cut the stock of the hemp. So anyway, needless to say, that was my first and last go at it. Like I just realized, you know what, that the learning curve is such that I can't afford the learning curve at this point. I can't afford, and I don't really even want to do it. I didn't even want to really do it. Like now to grow a garden, yeah, we have a garden. We have lots of tomatoes and potatoes and eggplant. But like TAPAH Prabhu said, like, what about the grains? What about the rice? What about the wheat? What about, all these other things that we use that are the staples of our diet pretty much? Beans, beans are hard to grow too. But anyway, I just wanted to add that I think that cooperation is going to be required, because we were hoping the cooperation was going to be through the collective devotee community of ISKCON, let's say. Let's use that for an example. But that's not happening, clearly. That's not going to happen. So now we basically have to see if we can kind of create another collective, because doing it on your own is possible. No question, it's possible. But collectively is going to be something that which I feel is going to be the more realistic way to go. Otherwise, we'll all be like, gardeners will have our, like we do now, we have our garden in the backyard, but it's certainly not going to make us self-sufficient.
Thank you, Jiva Mukta. I have a question for TAPAH Punj Prabhu. In that kind of circumstance, what would have Jivan Mukta needed to do to protect all those seeds? Have a big net over all that land? How do you prevent the birds from taking their share? I mean,
You have these cannons, these exploding, noisy cannons
Yeah,
that are on a timer.
Okay.
That helps.
Yeah,
But
all
it-
day long.
But ultimately, they're going to get a bunch of it.
Yeah.
And the other thing about hemp is that unless you have a market where that hemp is going to be processed, in other words, don't grow it if you don't have a market open to sell it.
Oh, we had the market. See, I was great. I was really good and efficient in establishing, the market, those who were going to process it. I had it all set up, and they were just like waiting for my hemp seed. But
and so were the birds.
Yeah. Okay.
Daneshwar Prabhu.
Jivan Mukta Prabhu, there's a devotee in Ireland who grows hemp, but besides making, what do they call it, not PCD oil, something like. He also makes hempcrete, and the fibers of the hemp plants are extremely valuable. Also, every part of that plant is valuable. So even if the birds take the seeds, there's a lot still there.
Absolutely. In Canada at the time, though, you had to verify that you burned the rest of the plant. Like it was illegal for you to store, like even the roots, the stalk, everything except the seed was allowed. You had to destroy the rest of the plant. By the way, I also want to say that, that was kind of a faulty model as well. That's not, I don't see that as being Tapa Punj Maharaj's model, because hemp isn't going to feed us. You know, you could live on the seed for a while, but I mean, 40 acres of hemp it's a cash crop, let's face it.
Right.
And that's not really the model that Tapa Punj Prabhu was presenting. Is that, am I correct, Prabhu?
Yeah, I mean, it could be there, but it's not. The first thing is get your food supply together,
Right.
and be able to share that in an equitable way that helps people become Krishna conscious. Then if you have ancillary businesses that are offshoots from that, more power to you, go for it.
Mhm.
I mean, I was very keen on teaching apprentices that you have to learn to read when you go back to Minnesota or wherever they were from, you have to learn to read the mosaic of your neighborhood as far as their food needs are, and address that and become relevant to your neighborhood as far as food supply goes.
Right.
That's the real local food movement.
Isn't that what what do they call that group? You know, they ride,
Soul food?
no, they ride their buggies and the horses, and
Yeah,
Mennonite.
the Amish.
the Mennonites and the Amish. Isn't that what they do?
Yeah, they also do a lot of outside marketing after they've satisfied the needs
Right.
internally of their community. The problem in the Krishna consciousness movement, though, is that devotees have this wrong idea that, well, we're just the vegetarian offshoot of the Amish. We're a vegetarian version of the Amish. That's not true, because the Amish have a whole different approach. They're 7 generations deep in farming, 7 generations. We can't even keep our kids on the farm.
Mhm.
They want to go off to the cities for sense gratification. So sustainability is kind of a moot point until you can do it in such a way with such festivity, joyful congregational development and festivity that your kids want to stay there. They want to learn to farm because it's such a wonderful, rich experience for them. If we don't have that, then you don't have sustainability. I mean, the fact is, look at most Krishna conscious rural communities. You basically got big ISKCON. You've got a bunch of householders who are struggling economically and having to work on the outside and getting old quick. And the young people are temporary summer employment workers who can never make enough money to do anything in terms of land procurement or a farming future. That's a really tragedy, is that this is all going on because of this centralized approach that the GBC and the ISKCON took up, of instead of each community being a federation of independent temples, city and country, it's all centralized. And that centralization is completely alien to what Srila Prabhupada warned against. He said, do not centralize, it will spoil everything, as did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. So the communities have become basically, you're either a customer or you're an employee of ISKCON. And the connection to the land is, that's up to you. But there's no culture there where that's taught. It's really unfortunate. That's what I was doing. And they didn't like it because I was successful.
But the fact that there's no culture, you can't really blame the devotees, because we were all raised in the city, right?
No, but what I'm saying is that the amount of revenue coming into a place like New Vrindavan should create the framework for that culture to prosper.
Yes. Yeah,
and that's not what's happening. People are not investing in land and in infrastructure for farming, and let's teach this culture to others. They're buying nice cars and bigger houses.
And that's my point, is that if we're going to do it New Vrindavan is not going to accommodate you, clearly.
No.
So we need something in place where New Vrindavan and ISKCON and these type of institutions that were supposed to provide that support, that we need something to kind of replace that.
Right, exactly.
Right? We need someone or something or a group to replace that and say, you know what? And it's possible, because there's a lot of devotees out there that have done well economically, And it's just a question of saying, okay, here's some land. Let's put our heads together and let's do it.
Right, exactly. A
And
good
that's-
example, I'm sorry, a good example of that is Govinda Dasi. I don't know if she's listening or not.
I invited you.
She has 160 acres of property on the edge of eastern Texas and Louisiana. And it's nice property. It's an ideal climate. She needs devotees. She needs help.
Yeah. But at the same time, devotees are so kind of burnt and fried, so to use that term, that it's a question of trust too. Like, you're going to have a devotee there to work on the land. You're sacrificing other opportunities. Let's face it. If you could be doing IT work and making 120 grand a year, and you're going to sacrifice that to go work on the farm. Now, if you do that, at the very least, you want some stake, some interest in it. Something. You want some, or at the very least, some assurance that all your labor and all the effort that you're putting into developing this person's land isn't going to go to waste. Is all for naught down the road when let's say they were to pass away, or they give the land to someone else, or it's sold, and now a developer comes in and wants it, and everyone's out.
Right. So the solution to that is you do what the Amish do. They have formed, their communities are centered around a legal plan that is a 501D landholding company and a 501D1, which is a way to share profit, so that they have the ability to do business, to share the dividends from the profit of that business, and they have a land holding company to preserve the mission. So in New Vrindavan, we recently did this because of the frustration of trying to work with ISKCON Incorporated. And that is, we formed a 501c3 so we can get donations. This is on a 12-acre piece of property. We formed a 501D so we can do business legally. And we formed a 501D1 so we have a land holding company, so that new people coming are not saddled with the burden of trying to buy land and build a house and raise a family. It's impossible. So we're in other words, we're setting it up. And I would like, if anybody wants to contact me, I can explain the legal work involved with that. And I think that's the model we have to go for.
Okay, so if I'm a grihasta, young grihasta, and I'm interested. I want in. So, but I need a place to stay. Where would I stay? Where would my house be?
Well, you would work cooperatively with the people already on that land to build a house. That is a maybe cordwood or straw bale or some other way that's not in the traditional building sense of building a house for $100,000 or $75,000.
You would build a house on that land?
On that land.
Okay,
right.
but at a certain point, you're using up your agricultural land for residential homes.
Not in West Virginia.
Excuse me, Prabhu, excuse me for interjecting for a moment. I just like to say that if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's towards the right, kind of like a little bit right to the middle, there's a thing called reactions. And if you click on it, then there's something called raise hand. So that way everyone gets an opportunity to interact. Dineshwar Prabhu's had his hand up for a while.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Thank you. I wanted to say, Naranjan Swami, he was GBC at Gitanagari for some time. Oh, back up. About the case of somebody working on the farm, using an example of Govinda Dasi, and somebody's working the land. The problem we get is somebody's going to be working the land or working the oxen, even more challenging. And somebody else is living on the farm and they got a job, maybe sitting at their computer all day and they're pulling in 100 grand. The big challenge Naranjan Swami experienced at Gitanagari was the disparity between the devotees, because some devotees would have, and this is back in the 80s, right, before we had all these electronic goodies, some devotees would have a telephone in their apartment and others didn't, or some devotees would have a car and others didn't. And this was a source of great friction in the community about who gets what. And so the problem is that we're not clear on the culture. What's the culture of Krishna consciousness? What's the culture that we're going to live in? As devotees, we're trying to pioneer a new culture. And we've got 1 foot in Krishna culture, we've got 1 foot in the dominant culture. And so we're kind of like spiritual schizophrenics. You know, we go this way and that way, depending on what suits us. And consequently, we're hamstrung. We can't really move forward with simple living as long as we don't have a clear ideology that we're all aligned with of introducing an alternative culture. And of course, this is challenged by the fact of what we call Rajagun. Rajagun is it's very attractive. It's very enticing. We all have grown up with Rajagun our whole lives. And for somebody who's in Rajagun, Sattvagun doesn't look very nice, right? It's boring, or it's a lot of work, or you get your hands dirty, or whatever. But, Rajagun, right? The women, they want to have nice nails. So how are you going to go out and dig in the garden when it's going to ruin your nails, etc. So we've got these two cultures going on, and this is a challenge that, as far as I've seen, we haven't addressed. I will say, visiting New Rajadam, Shivaram Swami's project, they have a pretty good handle on this. I think they're probably the best example we have in all of ISKCON for the attempt to introduce a different culture. But they're blessed with the fact that the Hungarian government, years ago, I don't know if it's still true, the policy of the Hungarian government was that everybody had to give 1% of their taxes to a charity. And so there is, of course, the Catholic Church was first on the list, but New Rajadam, the Hare Krishna movement, was the 4th leading recipient of that tax money. So they had a lot of money to work with. They didn't have to deal with the money problem that you've been talking about in Jiva Mukta. So that's allowed them to basically buy their way out of dominant culture. And this is our challenge too. We have to buy our way out of the culture. Now, our projects have made a lot of money too. New Vrindavan, Gitanagari, millions of dollars. But because we didn't have a clear concept of what we are doing to establish an alternative culture, we did not use that money to establish infrastructure to free ourselves from the money economy. Consequently, everybody's still in the money economy and looking, unfortunately, towards our Indian congregants for solving our economic problem. So it's a cultural problem,
Right.
by and
Good
large.
point.
I'll stop there.
Great point.
So I'd like everyone to please, on respectful obeisances.
Hi, Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, Vischa, Vicha, Janang Bhaktiyo,
Vaishnavino.
Namo Namaha, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare
Jai.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.